My son struck out tonight. 5 pitches, 5 swings, 5 misses. And on the drive home, I realized he was doing exactly what so many of us do every single day. And it's quietly costing us everything. Let me back up. I wasn't planning on recording this episode, mostly because I don't know much about baseball, and I wasn't expecting this to happen tonight. And if you asked my son tonight, he'd tell you he also doesn't know much about baseball. But I watched him up at that plate. I watched him trying so hard. I watched him wanting it. And I watched him strike out. 5 pitches, 5 swings, 5 misses. And then I watched him walk off the field. You know, when your kid is trying not to cry, they're blinking too fast. Their lip starts doing that little thing. It's so cute. They're looking everywhere except at you because they're working so hard to hold it together. That was him. And then he got to me and he completely fell apart. The tears came, the disappointment came, the heartbreak came, and if I'm being honest, mine did too. Because if you're a parent, you know this feeling. You would take every bit of that pain if you could. You'd rather be the one standing at the plate, missing the ball, feeling the embarrassment, than watch your child feel it. I hugged him. I said all the things. It's okay. You're learning. Look, every kid out here is learning too. And I meant every word. But then I shifted into fix it mode because that's what we do when someone we love is hurting. We try to solve it. I reminded him of the commitment he made to his team. I reminded him that his team also needed him. I encouraged him to go back out there. Nothing worked. And here's why. This wasn't a tantrum. Every parent knows the difference. A tantrum sounds different. It feels different. This was sadness, real sadness. The kind that comes when you wanted something and it didn't happen. The kind that comes when you try your hardest and it still isn't enough. The kind that comes when your little heart starts quietly wondering, maybe I'm not good enough. So we went home. And on that drive, I kept thinking about him as I held his hand awkwardly in the back seat. But if I'm being honest, I was also thinking about myself because there was another layer to what was happening that night. Watching your child fail is excruciating, not because failure is bad, but because you cannot do anything about it. You can't swing the bat for them. You can't absorb the disappointment for them. You can't rescue them from the feeling. And if I'm being really truthful, part of me wanted him to quit, not because I think quitting is the answer, because I wanted the discomfort to stop. His discomfort, mine, the helpless, gut wrenching feeling of watching someone you love hurt when you can't fix it. And isn't that interesting? How often do we walk away from something not because it's wrong for us, but because we're desperate for the discomfort to end? This episode isn't really about baseball. It's about disappointment. It's about courage. And it's about the dangerous habit of turning one painful moment into a story about who we are. Today, we're going to talk about what happens when an experience becomes an identity and why so many of us quit on ourselves long before the game is actually over. Welcome to Lo's Couch. I'm Lo, and this is the space where we say the things we're actually thinking, the messy, honest, sometimes uncomfortable stuff. No filters, no fixing, just real conversations as we figure it out together. All right, time to grab a seat. My son wasn't doing anything unusual. He was doing something deeply, painfully human. He had a disappointing experience. And almost immediately, he started turning it into an identity. I missed the ball became I'm bad at baseball. I'm bad at baseball became I hate baseball. I hate baseball became I'm never doing this again, mummy. And I thought, wait, women do this every single day. I want you to actually stop for a second and think about where you're doing this right now. We do it with our businesses, with our relationships, with our friendships, with our parenting, with our bodies, with our dreams, with ideas we haven't even said out loud yet. One thing doesn't go according to plan, and suddenly we're writing the whole story. The podcast episode doesn't perform. Nobody signs up for the offer. The conversation goes sideways. The boundary isn't received well. The friend doesn't text back. The post gets 12 likes. The launch falls flat. And suddenly, we're not just disappointed, we are questioning everything. Can you tell? I'm talking about myself here. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe nobody cares. Maybe I'm not a real leader. Maybe I should just stop. And here's what I want you to hear, because this is the important thing I'm going to say today. I don't think most women abandon themselves in one big dramatic moment. I think it happens quietly, almost invisibly, in tiny decisions that feel completely reasonable at the time. The podcast episode they never record, the business they stop mentioning, the boundary they don't set, the dream they keep tucked in a notebook, the conversation they have rehearsed for 6 months but have never had. The version of themselves they slowly, quietly stop becoming, not because they don't want it, but because at some point they probably got hurt. And I think one of the sneakiest forms of self abandonment is quitting on ourselves too soon. Not because something genuinely isn't aligned, and not because we're being called somewhere else, not because we're making a wise, grounded decision, but because we're hurt, because disappointment is uncomfortable, because trying again means risking another strikeout. And here's the part that keeps me up at night. Women are incredibly good at making this sound like wisdom. We call it protecting our peace, being realistic, reading the signs, knowing when to walk away. And sometimes those things are absolutely true. But sometimes, and I say this with so much love, we are just wounded. And wounded people often mistake fear for wisdom. I want you to sit with that for a second because I think that one sentence might change things for you if you let it. Wounded people often mistake fear for wisdom. When was the last time you told yourself a story about why something wasn't working and it sounded wise, but underneath it, you were just scared, hurt, exhausted from trying, maybe? I've done this more times than I can count. There have been so many moments with Unmuted and Lowe's Couch where I have wanted to quietly disappear. Not publicly, not dramatically, just slowly stop. Stop posting, stop recording, stop talking about it. I remember last year I had poured everything into a launch. I'd worked on it for months. I believed in it completely. I had signed up for a business coach. I had done all of the things, and it didn't go the way I hoped. And I remember sitting at my desk thinking, maybe this just isn't meant for me. Maybe I'm reading the room wrong. Maybe the timing isn't right. All of it sounded very reasonable. And if I'm being honest, I was devastated. I wanted proof before I kept going. I wanted certainty before I continued. I wanted evidence that it was going to work before I was willing to risk failing again. And isn't that what so many of us are waiting for? Proof? Proof the business will work. Proof the relationship will get better. Proof the healing will work. Proof we won't look foolish. Proof the risk is worth taking. But here's the truth nobody tells you. The proof usually comes after the courage, not before it. And you know what else nobody tells you about courage? It rarely feels brave. It feels awkward, vulnerable, embarrassing. It feels like being bad at something in public. It feels like posting when nobody responds. It feels like launching before you're ready. It feels like setting a boundary and bracing for the fallout. We imagine courage looks like confidence. But most of the time, courage looks like showing up before confidence even arrives. So here's the framework I want to give you, because I think it's going to change how you talk to yourself, or I hope it will. There is a difference between an experience and an identity. I missed the ball. That's an experience. I'm bad at baseball. That's an identity. My launch didn't go well. Experience. I'm not meant for this. Identity. That conversation was hard. Experience. I'm terrible at relationships. Identity. The post flopped. Experience. Nobody cares what I have to say. Identity. One is information, the other is a story. And the stories we tell ourselves, especially in our most painful moments, shape everything. I wasn't going to let Jackson decide he hated baseball in the middle of tears. Not because his feelings weren't valid, they absolutely were, but because the disappointment was talking, the embarrassment was talking, the frustration was talking, and those feelings deserve space, but they do not deserve the final vote. The same is true for you. Feel the disappointment, cry if you need to, be angry, be frustrated, be sad, be completely unapologetically human. But do not let the version of you that is hurting make decisions for the version of you that is healing. Give yourself time, give yourself perspective, give yourself grace, and then decide. Next week, Jackson's going to put the cleats back on. We'll get in the car. We'll go to practice. Not because he will suddenly be amazing, not because he will magically hit every ball, not because he will never be disappointed again, but because I want him to learn something more important than baseball. I want him to learn that disappointment is not a stop sign. I want him to learn that one bad day does not define him. I want him to learn that courage isn't getting it right, it's showing up again. The older I get, the less interested I am in teaching my kids how to avoid failure. I want to teach them how to survive it, how to move through it, because failure isn't the thing that steals our lives. Fear is. Self abandonment is. Deciding we're done before we've actually begun is. And here's where I'm going to leave you today. Think about the one thing you have quietly stopped doing, not because it wasn't right for you, but because it hurt, because it didn't work the first time. Because you got a strikeout and somewhere in the pain, you decided it meant something about who you are. Write it down and then ask yourself one honest question. Is this wisdom or is this a wound talking? Because here's what I know. The game isn't over every time you strike out. It's only over when you decide it is. You don't have to love what happened. You don't have to pretend it didn't hurt. You don't have to rush to find the lesson. But don't build a life around one painful moment. Don't turn an experience into an identity. Don't let one strikeout convince you that you're not a baseball player, or a business owner, or a good mom, or a leader, or someone who is absolutely worthy of taking up space. The game isn't over. You just struck out. Take a breath. Pick up the bat and step back into the batter's box. If you'd like more support between episodes, join the Unmuted Letters. Every week, I send a note about self trust, self abandonment, and what it looks like to come back to yourself. The link is in the show notes. Thanks for sitting with me. I'll see you next week.